Hey everyone. You ever wonder how the most disciplined warriors in history, the samurai, actually slept? I mean, yeah, we hear all about their swords, their honor, their battles, and their training. But what about the quiet hours? What about when the armor's off, the katana is sheathed, and the night sets in? How did they rest? Especially when they were on long sea voyages or tucked away inside those towering Japanese castles. Well, today I'm going to take you into that part of samurai life no one really talks about. Their nights. And trust me, even the way they slept tells you a whole lot about who they were. It wasn't just about closing your eyes and calling it a day. For the samurai, sleep was still a part of discipline, strategy, and even survival. Let's start with the more grounded setting, the castle. So picture this. You're a mid-ranked samurai in service to a powerful lord, a daimyo. You've spent the day either training, patrolling, or maybe planning defense strategies with your unit. As the sun goes down, you're finally allowed to retire. But this isn't some private, cozy bedroom we're talking about. Nope. The living and sleeping quarters of samurai were often shared spaces. Open rooms with tatami floors and sliding paper walls. Privacy, minimal, comfort, functional. A samurai's sleeping setup was usually simple. A tatami mat beneath and a futon, which back then was thinner than the modern ones, that could be rolled and stored during the day. The idea was flexibility and discipline, not luxury. Pillows were sometimes wooden or filled with buckwheat husks. Not exactly memory foam, right? But here's where it gets interesting. Samurai slept with their weapons. That wasn't just a habit. That was a rule. The katana or wakizashi, depending on the setting, was placed within arm's reach, usually parallel to their body. Blade edge facing up. Why? In case of an attack. Even while sleeping, a samurai had to be ready to react. Many stories tell of warriors who could spring into action within seconds. Fully alert, weapon drawn. This wasn't myth. It was training. You might think, well, how restful could that be? That's the thing. Samurai didn't view sleep the same way we do. They weren't seeking comfort. They were seeking just enough rest to function at full capacity. Physically, mentally, and emotionally. Everything was rooted in purpose and balance. Even the position they slept in mattered. Often, samurai would sleep on their sides or backs, facing the entry point of the room. That wasn't just strategic. It was habitual. You always keep your eyes where the danger could appear. Now, in a castle environment, especially during peaceful times, they might let their guard down a little more. Maybe. But the idea of being ready to die at any moment was drilled so deeply into samurai culture that even during rest, they were warriors first. The mindset didn't switch off. That's the heart of Bushido, the way of the warrior. Now let's take things out to sea. Yeah, that's right, samurai didn't just live on land. During certain periods of Japanese history, especially in times of internal war or coastal defense, samurai traveled by sea. These weren't massive ships like pirate galleons or European war vessels. Japanese ships, or kobaya and itakebian, were usually wooden, flat-bottomed boats. They were sturdy but minimalistic, more about function than comfort. Sleeping on a ship as a samurai? That was another level of discomfort. Space was limited. You might have a deck area or a cramped below-deck section to rest in, depending on your rank. Higher-ranking samurai might have a private screen or partition, but most warriors, even experienced ones, slept shoulder to shoulder with their comrades. Think about it. Rolling waves, creaking wood, damp air, sometimes storms. And still, these guys had to rest, alert, and ready to fight. They would often sleep in armor, or at least part of it, especially if danger was expected. Some removed only the helmet and parts of the arm or leg guards. But the core protection stayed on. Imagine trying to fall asleep on a rocking wooden ship in partial armor, with your sword strapped next to you, knowing pirates or rival clans could ambush at any time. Not exactly luxury travel. Blankets were rare. If it was cold, they'd rely on cloaks or layered clothing. Some might use straw mats as insulation beneath them. And again, the weapon was always by the side, just like in the castle. What's amazing is that despite the harshness of it all, samurai adapted. Their mindset was tuned to endure, not to complain, not to seek comfort, but to persist through whatever conditions they faced. You might be wondering, didn't they ever get exhausted? Of course. Samurai weren't robots. There are historical accounts of warriors passing out from fatigue after long marches or battles. But even exhaustion was treated as part of the journey. And still, their sleeping discipline was rarely compromised. Because in their world, being caught off guard could mean not just death, but dishonor. And dishonor? That was worse than death. I want you to keep in mind, too, these weren't just military guys. Samurai were deeply spiritual. Many practiced Zen Buddhism, which shaped how they viewed rest and awareness. Meditation and stillness were part of their training. So even in rest, they were sharpening the mind. In some cases, they used short, controlled naps, what we might now call polyphasic sleep. Little bursts of recovery instead of long, deep sleep cycles. Especially on campaigns or during sieges, sleeping in small shifts was common. You rest, your comrade watches. Then you switch. It wasn't just sleeping, it was watching and being watched. A trust exercise. A tactical rhythm. And yet, through all of this, the samurai kept a kind of serenity. That's something modern people admire, the quiet dignity of these warriors. Even in discomfort, even in constant readiness. That's the world of samurai rest. Not really sleep the way we think of it, but disciplined recovery with a sword within reach. Now, here's something you might not expect. For samurai, sleep was not just a break from the day. It was part of their warrior mindset. Think of it like this: most of us go to bed to rest, so we can feel better tomorrow. But for a samurai, going to sleep was more like preparing for death with grace. Not in a dark way, but in a way that accepted reality. They believed that every night could be their last, and that if death came in their sleep, they should meet it with dignity. There's even a Zen saying that many samurai lived by. When walking, just walk. When eating, just eat. And yes, when sleeping, just sleep. So, they didn't toss and turn thinking about regrets. They didn't worry about what could happen tomorrow. Samurai trained their minds to let go, even in the face of danger. Which is crazy to think about when you're sleeping on a creaky ship or in a cold castle room with a sword by your side. But that calm mindset, that ability to be still, was one of their superpowers. Let's dive deeper into the castle life for a moment. Some samurai, especially those stationed in larger castles like Himeji or Edo, lived in rotating shifts. At night, not everyone was allowed to sleep. Guards took turns, rotating every 2 or 3 hours. That meant even if you were resting, you were never truly alone, and someone was always alert. There was a structure to everything. You might sleep at midnight, wake at 2 a.m. for your shift, then try to catch more rest around dawn. It was more of a schedule than a peaceful night's sleep. And the hierarchy played a big role too. Higher-ranked samurai often had slightly more private quarters. They might sleep in rooms with fusuma, painted sliding doors, maybe with their own small brazier to warm the room in winter. But even they followed the same habits: no extravagant beds, no comfort-first lifestyle. They believed in austere living even at the top. A lot of younger samurai trained from an early age to sleep lightly and react quickly. Some texts even say a samurai should be able to wake, sit up, and be combat-ready in under 10 seconds. There are stories of warriors springing up from futons and drawing their swords in a single motion. To us, that sounds insane. But for them, it was expected. It was drilled into them through repetition and mindset training. Now let's shift back to the open sea where things got rougher. Literally. Samurai on ships weren't always soldiers at sea. Sometimes they were part of naval escorts, invasion forces, or even traveling with lords to distant provinces. Japanese naval vessels, like the Itakeibun, were essentially floating fortresses. But even so, they weren't cruise ships. They had minimal space below deck, very little ventilation, and often smelled like salt, tar, smoke, and sweat. Sleeping in that environment meant you were either exhausted, experienced, or both. During stormy nights, rest was even harder. Imagine lying on a wooden floor, armor clinking beside you, rain pounding the roof, sails flapping violently, and you're expected to fall asleep. The ship rocks, sometimes lurches, and all the while your body is adjusting to the motion. Seasickness? Yeah, that happened even to samurai. But complaining wasn't part of the code. You endured. You adapted. Sometimes, samurai would tie a cloth around their waist and secure it to a support beam, just to keep from rolling off their sleeping area. In extreme cases, they might sleep sitting up, leaning against a crate or mast. In some of the older naval campaigns, entire crews would sleep huddled in one corner of the ship, rotated by rank, with senior warriors on the inside and lower-ranked Shigaru or oarsmen closer to the walls. They also had to protect their swords from sea moisture. Salt air and humidity were brutal on blades. So samurai would wrap their katana in oiled cloth, or even store them in wooden scabbards with tight seals to avoid rust. That's right, even while sleeping, they were thinking about the preservation of their soul, because the sword wasn't just a weapon. It was considered an extension of the samurai spirit. Now here's a cool detail. Samurai didn't just rely on brute strength. Their leaders believed in strategy, routine, and order. That extended even to sleep. Before battles, soldiers were often ordered to rest. Not optional, ordered. Why? Because a tired army is a dead army. Samurai generals knew that alert minds and fresh reflexes could win or lose a fight. So even though rest was uncomfortable, it was prioritized tactically. But what about dreams? Believe it or not, dreams mattered to samurai. In some periods, dreams were seen as omens, either warnings or signs of favor. There are accounts of generals waking from vivid dreams and changing their plans the next morning. One famous daimyo reportedly dreamed of a hawk flying east and ordered a surprise attack at dawn, and it worked. So while sleep was about recovery, it was also a spiritual space, a realm between life and death where messages could come. Pretty wild, right? This is where the samurai world blurs between the practical and the mystical. They lived in mud, wore armor for days at a time, and slept in battle formations, yet still followed signs from dreams and believed in ancestral guidance. It's a paradox that makes the samurai endlessly fascinating. Absolute discipline on the outside, deep belief and spirituality on the inside. And next time someone says, "Man, I slept terrible last night," just think about being a samurai sleeping in the belly of a ship, with armor pressing into your ribs, the sea howling outside, and your sword clutched at your side in case of attack. It makes our bad nights seem a little soft, doesn't it? So now that we've got a sense of where and how samurai slept, on hard tatama floors, in armor, at sea, or in drafty castle rooms, let's talk about what they actually did before sleep. Because here's the truth. A samurai didn't just lie down and knock out. Even bedtime had structure, routine, ritual. Many samurai followed a kind of mental preparation before sleep. Remember, these were warriors who lived by a strict code. So before they let their guard down, even slightly, they had to be sure everything was in order. Their sword would be cleaned and placed carefully near their futon or mat, usually facing up and with the hilt toward their dominant hand. This wasn't just habit, it was instinct. And in a lot of clans, it was expected that a samurai would briefly meditate before rest. Just a few minutes, often sitting in seiza, that formal kneeling position, with their eyes half closed, hands resting lightly in their lap. The idea was to clear the mind, to let go of thoughts and attachments before lying down. It wasn't about falling asleep fast. It was about going to sleep with awareness, like everything else in their life. Clean blade, calm mind, body still. That was the goal. In some schools of thought, especially among those influenced by Zen Buddhism, this bedtime meditation was also a chance to reflect on death. Not in a morbid way, but as a reminder that death could come at any moment. Sounds intense, but to a samurai, this awareness made them more alive. If you were at peace with the idea that you might not wake up, then you could rest more deeply, more fully. You didn't cling to the future, you just existed in that one moment. Now, let's not forget, samurai weren't born knowing this stuff. They were trained from childhood. Boys from samurai families, even as young as 5 or 6, were taught not to fear the dark, not to flinch at noises, not to cry out in the night. Think about that. Most of us remember being scared of shadows or creaky sounds as kids, but samurai children were expected to sleep with composure, even during storms or when alone. It was part of becoming resilient. Some dojos had specific exercises for it. Teachers would sneak into the sleeping quarters at night and startle the students, banging bamboo sticks or stomping loudly. The goal wasn't cruelty, it was control. The kids were expected to wake up calmly, reach for their practice sword, and respond with focus, not panic. Those who flailed or screamed were corrected. Those who rose with calm were praised. This training continued through adolescence. Samurai teens were often tasked with night watches, learning to sit silently in the shadows while others slept. They learned to recognize footsteps, to distinguish between the wind and human movement, to spot threats in darkness. And when they slept, it was with the knowledge that someone else was watching over them, just like they would someday do for others. It created a culture of mutual trust and constant awareness. Now back to adult samurai. Let's talk about nighttime discipline. There were strict rules in some domains. For instance, in the Tokugawa period, many castles had curfews. After a certain hour, no one was allowed to move between rooms or walk the halls unless on official watch duty. Why? Because movement at night could signal an intruder, a traitor, or an assassin. Even innocent wandering was dangerous. If a samurai was caught moving without reason, he could be questioned or worse. So before lying down, you made sure everything was settled. Armor stored or partially worn, depending on the threat level. Sword positioned, fire extinguished, and mind clear. Some clans even had a custom where the youngest samurai in a room would do a final check, quietly confirming all doors were latched, no items were misplaced, and everyone was accounted for. Then silence. And trust me, it was silent. These guys didn't stay up watching shows or chatting. Sleep time was taken seriously. It was part of the rhythm of life. Now, you're probably wondering, did samurai ever get attacked while sleeping? Yes. And that's exactly why these routines existed. There are multiple historical accounts of night raids, castle infiltrations, and sudden betrayals. In fact, one of the most famous events in samurai history, the 47 Ronin revenge attack, was carried out in the dead of night while the target's guards were asleep. The Ronin used snow for silence, scaled walls, and executed their mission while their enemies were caught off guard. Stories like that were burned into samurai memory. They knew, if you're not ready while you sleep, you might not wake up at all. So the discipline wasn't just about tradition. It was about survival. Even at sea, samurai were trained to wake at the smallest sound. A shift in the water, a whisper of a paddle, a creak that didn't belong. Sleep was light, intentional, and always under control. And yes, sometimes sleep didn't come at all. On the eve of battle, many warriors stayed awake all night, cleaning their weapons, writing final letters, praying, or sitting in silent reflection. Not out of fear, but out of purpose. They believed that if you die in battle, you die as you lived. So everything, even sleep, had to reflect your way of life. So imagine you've trained your whole life to sleep like a warrior. You've learned to lie still, to breathe slow, to wake up fast. But here's the question. What did that actually feel like? To live that way, every night? Some surviving diaries and scrolls from the Edo and Sengoku periods give us a little window into it. In one, a mid-ranked samurai writes about sleeping in a snow-covered outpost, wrapped in a thin blanket, katana under his chest, with the wind howling through the bamboo walls. He talks about how the cold made his bones ache, but that his mind had to remain warm. That phrase stuck with me. The mind must stay warm. It wasn't just about endurance. It was about staying focused even in misery. Another warrior recounts how he would fall asleep counting his breath, one by one, in a slow rhythm. Not to force sleep, but to quiet his inner world. That's a kind of mindfulness that sounds really modern, right? But they were doing it hundreds of years ago, without apps or pillows or ambient playlists. Just self-discipline and presence. And here's the wild part, this wasn't just about nighttime rest. It was about living every moment deliberately. A samurai wasn't supposed to just live during the day and shut off at night. His awareness, his posture, his alertness, it was constant. Even when unconscious, his body was trained to react. Even while dreaming, his soul remained prepared. It kind of reminds me of stories from modern special forces. Soldiers who learn to sleep lightly in dangerous environments, who can wake up and act without hesitation. That's not a coincidence. Samurai were, in many ways, the spiritual ancestors of elite warriors today. In fact, some modern martial arts schools still recreate samurai sleeping drills. Students practice silent wake-ups, where an instructor suddenly enters the room in the middle of the night. The student has to wake up silently, arm themselves, and be ready to defend in under 10 seconds, all without panic. Sounds familiar, right? But here's something even more fascinating. Some samurai believed in controlling dreams. No joke. In certain schools of thought, especially influenced by Zen and esoteric Buddhism, dreams were considered not only messages but places to train. Warriors believed they could visualize techniques in their sleep, repeating forms and strikes in the mind to sharpen them in real life. Today, we call that lucid dreaming. Back then, they called it devotion. Think about that, training in your sleep. One legendary swordsman, Yagyu Munenori, even wrote about using sleep as a way to release ego, to let go of personal ambition and become more fluid, more adaptable. He said, "When the body sleeps, the soul listens." That kind of thinking made their nights just as important as their days. And that philosophy affected everything, even the design of their sleeping spaces. For example, castle sleeping quarters were often laid out in strategic ways. Lower-ranked samurai slept near entrances or outer walls. Why? Because they'd be the first line of defense in case of attack. Higher-ranked warriors slept deeper inside, but always with an escape route in mind. No samurai would sleep in a room with only one door unless absolutely necessary. And no one, no matter their rank, ever slept facing away from the entrance unless another warrior was watching their back. There's this constant theme of layered trust. You trust your blade. You trust your brothers in arms. And you trust yourself that you'll wake up if you need to, that you'll act without thinking, that you won't freeze in fear. You also see this in the architecture of ship cabins. On warships, there was almost never privacy. Hammocks weren't really used in Japanese naval design. Instead, there were shared wooden bunks or flat planks, sometimes even woven mats tied to the floor. Rank determined who got the driest spot, or the one furthest from the cannon storage, not who got the fluffiest bedding. Sometimes, the entire crew would sleep in formation, literally lined up in rows, weapons stacked nearby. And if someone broke formation, or moved too much, it was seen as a lack of discipline. The samurai ideal was to sleep still, not stiff, but composed, relaxed yet ready. Now, not every samurai lived like this all the time. During peacetime, many relaxed the rules. Some adopted more comfort, padded futons, incense, warm tea before bed. But even then, the mindset never disappeared. You could be at peace, but you never grew soft. That balance, calm but prepared, is part of what made the samurai such a powerful force. It's easy to romanticize it, to imagine a noble warrior meditating under the moonlight, sword beside him, sleeping in silence. And yeah, that happened. But so did nights of rain dripping through the roof, of cramped quarters, of hunger keeping you awake, of pain in your knees from old injuries. The samurai endured all of it. Not because they were superhuman, but because they trained for it. They accepted discomfort as a teacher. That's something we can learn from today. I mean, think about it. We live in a world full of pillows, climate control, white noise, and still so many people can't fall asleep. Meanwhile, these warriors learned to rest in ships rocking with waves, in castles under threat, on cold floors next to firewood and armor. Why? Because they trained their minds. They didn't just go to bed. They entered a new state with intent. And even in sleep, they never left the way of the warrior. So now we've come full circle. We've looked at how samurai slept in castles, on tatami mats in shared chambers, their swords always within reach. We've seen them rest aboard ships, on rough wooden floors, bracing for storms and ambushes. We've explored how they trained themselves to fall asleep like warriors and wake like sentinels, even under threat. But what does all of it mean? It means this. To the samurai, sleep wasn't an escape from life. It was part of life. Another chance to live with awareness. A chance to rehearse death without fear. A place to return to stillness, not out of weakness, but out of strength. And this philosophy, this deliberate balance between tension and release, didn't just vanish with time. You still see it today in the discipline of martial artists, in the silence of soldiers, in people who wake up at 5 a.m. to train before the world even stirs. You see it in those who don't need soft music to sleep, or blackout curtains or perfect silence. You see it in people who treat rest not as luxury, but as fuel, as another part of the mission. The samurai had a word for this kind of living, shoshin. It means beginner's mind, staying alert, staying open, sleeping like someone who might have to rise and act at any moment. Now, if you're picturing some gruff, emotionless warrior staring at a wall all night, that's not the full picture. Samurai were also poets, calligraphers, gardeners, fathers. They dreamed like everyone else. Some even wrote beautiful haiku about sleep, about the moon, about drifting off in the quiet of the night. Here's one I came across, translated from an Edo period samurai poet. My blade beside me, the fire turns to warm ash. I drift without fear. That's the spirit they carried. Readiness and peace, together. And that's something kind of powerful, right? Because in a world that constantly tells us to stay busy, always connected, always moving, the samurai remind us that stillness is strength too. That the way you rest reveals the way you live. That being prepared isn't about paranoia. It's about respect. For yourself, for the moment, and for those you protect. Imagine this for a second. You're a samurai. You've trained all day. You've patrolled the castle walls. You've helped teach younger warriors how to tie their armor faster. You've checked your blade for cracks. You've eaten simply rice, some pickled vegetables, maybe grilled fish if you're lucky. Night falls. You enter your chamber. It's quiet. Just the sound of the wind outside the shoji screen. You lay down on your futon, katana placed gently beside you. Your eyes close. Your breath slows. You're not worried. You're not afraid. You've lived the day with honor. If death comes tonight, so be it. But if the sun rises again, you'll wake. And rise without hesitation. Because that's the samurai way. And you don't have to be a warrior to carry a bit of that with you. Maybe tonight, before bed, you put your phone away a little earlier. Maybe you lie still and listen to your breath. Maybe you imagine your own version of a sword, your purpose, your strength, resting beside you. And maybe, just maybe, you sleep not to escape but to return, stronger. Thanks for watching, and if this glimpse into samurai life spoke to you, leave a comment below. Would you have slept like they did? Could you? Don't forget to like, subscribe, and check out the next video, where we explore how samurai faced fear and why they weren't as emotionless as people think. Until next time, sleep well and live with intent. See you on the path.